On this episode of Boundary Breakers, I sit down with one of the top AI experts in the world. Wolf Ruzicka is a German-born executive that has served on over a dozen boards across the world and has led East Bank Technologies for the last 17 years, where they have implemented AI solutions for businesses, since he got there. I thought that I knew a little bit about artificial intelligence and what it is, the proposed future. I realized that I know very little because Wolf took me to school. This guy is a fascinating person, and there are few people that know more about AI than Wolf. If you have any interest in the subject, you're going to love this episode. Boundary Breakers is brought to you by Carter & Clark. With that said, could you give us just, a few minutes on your background, where you grew up and, how you got started in your career?
Yeah. So first of all, born in Nuremberg in Germany. My dad escaped communism during the Cold War. My mom is a good old German, World War II generation, never finished high school. They both became entrepreneurs, small-time entrepreneurs. My mom had a cheese shop with more than 100 different sorts of cheese. I'm a cheese addict. I'm a red wine addict. I didn't get my red wine back then yet. And my dad started his own small shop engineering company to design, heating, air conditioning, and these kinds of systems for small builders in southern Germany. He never wanted to hire anybody. He cherished this work-life balance to be by himself, and whenever he wanted to go to the swimming pool, to just drag me along and not work. And so I did get a little bit of that. And then very soon thereafter, we both were poor. So I grew up in a really poor family in Germany. I remember carrying, buckets of coal up from the basement in order to heat the apartment that we had in one of those post-World War II buildings that were quickly erected so that we had heating and hot water. There was no hot water on the tap. I spent many hours in my mom's cheese shop just doing homework. I turned out to be a very good student. So I was a number one graduate from my high school. But when I was 13, I came home one day. I was not a goody two shoes type of student. I tried to skip school as often as I could, go to the swimming pool, play basketball with the GIs that were stationed in my hometown. So when I was 13, I came home and my dad asked me if I had packed my bags yet. And I asked him, why would I pack my bags in the middle of a school year? And he said, I must have forgotten to tell you that Saturday I will drive you to Frankfurt and you're going to go to high school in Peru, South America, all by yourself. And of course, that was to pop my bubble, to just understand that I do live in a very sheltered life. And, of course, as a great dad, he took care of a great guest family for me. I went to high school there. And then on the way, to the airport and across the Atlantic, of course, I did not like my dad one bit. But when I came back, I realized what a gift he had given me. And then my journey never stopped. I went to high school in France, the next year in England, always by myself, the next year in Australia. I took a year off as I was a bit lost on what I wanted to do. So I spent some time in Northern Africa just trying to figure out life. And my dad always supportive, and my mom, of course, but not as supportive as moms typically are. And then when I came back, I graduated high school as number one. And then I scratched my head, what should I do? And when you don't know what to do, then you go to business school. And so I went to business school, supposedly one of the best ones in Germany. And very soon there, my mom popped my bubble when I came back home. And I said, well, Mom, I know everything about marketing now. The 7 Ps of marketing: price, placement, product. And I tried to explain it to her, and her eyes started glazing over. And she said, well, Wolf, that's really common sense. And so she popped my bubble. In the meantime, the Berlin Wall had come down. I was there when Reagan made his famous speech, tear down this wall, Mr. Gorbachev.
Wow.
And so I couldn't resist exploring where my dad came from, Eastern Europe. And so we went to Eastern Europe almost immediately. I ended up, interning for one of those strategic management consulting companies then for the Japanese government as they entered Eastern Europe. That then led me to conclude that maybe German business school is just not with it, but the Japanese were taking over the world at the time. They bought Rockefeller Center, and don't worry, Brandon, I'm almost done.
No, this is great. I'm eating it up. This is fantastic.
Thank you. And so they bought the Rockefeller Center in Manhattan, the heart of capitalism, in the city of capitalism, and the whole world was shocked. And Toyota was taking over the world. And so I concluded that maybe the Japanese figured it out. So I went to Tokyo University, trying to understand what the magic sauce of the Japanese is. There's no magic. So I ended up again just working for the Japanese government, didn't go to business school. And then you guys, the United States, tickled me. You charge so much for business schools, I couldn't afford it. But what if I fly to Manhattan and just sneak myself into Columbia Business School, where I don't need the credits? I just, nobody checks. So I sat in the back rows, listening to these famous professors, and it was just clear that business is common sense, just like my mom had explained it. So I again ended up, working for one of those strategic management consulting companies in Manhattan until my return flight. I flew back home. I decided but I do need a degree. And so I went to my old business school, which is a tiny school of less than 900 students. Everyone knows everybody. And I remember going up to the professor saying, "So I'm here to graduate." And he checked in his list of students. He said, "You are enrolled, but is it true I haven't seen you in 7 years?" I
Oh
said,
my
"Yes."
gosh.
Yes. And he was, of course, offended. I understand. And I told him, "Well, I may not know how you describe this in class, but I can tell you from my work how the controlling department of Mercedes-Benz works. I can tell you from my internship for Lufthansa in New Zealand how marketing at Lufthansa is done, and on it goes. And so I'll do my best to answer, the way it's done in the real world." Thank God, students can get two witnesses so that it is done the proper way, and there's two other professors during the final exams that are also witnesses, so that this kind of animosity cannot trickle into the final grade.
Right.
And with gnashing teeth, they had to let me graduate. I was famously the worst MBA that this school had ever graduated at, but I got my little 3-letter degree.
Yeah.
In the meantime, now going to how did I end up in the United States? The internet boom had started. We're talking mid 90s, and I just knew I had to get into the internet boom, and so that's how I stumbled into technology.
Gotcha. No, gosh, you must have practiced that a couple of times, because not only is it it's a compelling and interesting story, but it's also you hit the highlights really well. And one of the things I do want to talk a little bit about is, when you were 13, you said your dad popped your bubble. One of the things that fascinates me, and that I am fortunate enough with doing all these interviews, is I'm always looking for sort of common threads, right? Commonalities, like, these hyper successful folks that have achieved a lot in their lives. Are there common threads amongst all of them, right? Or is it just more of sort of random luck of the draw? And one thing that is really interesting to me is, childhood adversity seems to be, it's not a direct correlation, right? Where if there's childhood adversity, then adult success, but it seems more often than not, there's some childhood adversity event in highly successful people's childhood that I'm not quite sure exactly what it does, but have just only gotten so far in thinking it through that realize that it's a commonality. I'm curious. So your dad he just knew it intuitively that, adversity would help you grow, and that if he didn't do something like this, that then you would be sheltered and not be able to grow. And so gave you that gift.
Correct.
Of setting you off. Wow. That's pretty insightful and remarkable from a parent's perspective. I've got 5 kids. That had to be extremely difficult for him to do as well.
Extremely. And you cannot even imagine what it did to my mom and in the beginning. But once they realized what a gift they had given me, they were so proud of me being able to, fly to Auckland, New Zealand, all by myself, interning at Lufthansa, going to high school in Sydney, Australia, and coming back with, these rich experiences and being able to share them with them. And I told you about their background. It just made them so proud.
Yeah. No, that's really cool. That is really, really cool. And I think probably a lesson for a lot of parents these days is that the tendency is to do everything. The world is evil. Do everything you can to protect your children. And, it's one of the sort of interesting dichotomies in life is that you're actually doing your kids damage by doing that, because we only grow, through difficult times. And
yeah, and there's a little bit to add here. So what I keep telling everyone is stay in your comfort zone, but every single day try to make a conscious effort to get into your uncomfort zone. Do it professionally, do it personally. During the pandemic, I became very, very stationary. I got my COVID belly and my COVID double chin. And so what I did is one of those things where I decided I just need to sell my car, at least temporarily. It forces me to walk. It forces me to jump on a bike. And, I'm proud to say it did wonders for my health. But was it comfortable when it's snowing and you have no, comfortable Mercedes-Benz to drive in? No, but right. It helps. And I think it helps in all kinds of aspects of life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Could not agree more. Another thing that you mentioned too that I'd love to get your thoughts on is, you graduated high school, you weren't quite sure what you wanted to do with your life.
Right.
Well, whether people are willing to admit it or not, I think very few 18-year-olds, even 25-year-olds know what they want to do. I'm curious what you would tell, seeing what you've seen and going through what you've gone through and achieving what you've achieved, what you would tell your 18-year-old self, right? That didn't know what to do. If the question was, well, how do I find my way? As so many people ask, what are your thoughts to, the 18-year-olds in that spot right now?
Yeah, I'm lucky enough. I have two children. Lucas, he's 20, and Sienna is 18. So I could actually practice in real life what I would tell my 18-year-old self.
Perfect.
And, I think what we hear too often is just follow your passions. And if I ask my children or I ask my 18-year-old self, what is your passion? I would be hearing crickets. They don't know. And so I think there is a level lower than that you need to encourage young people to explore, and that is interests. Just be interested in something. And are there themes or topics in the world? Is it science? Is it technology? Is it culture? Is it, in Lucas' case, filmmaking, on his iPhone? In Sienna's case, is it cooking? Are you interested in that? Then explore it. And as you explore your interests, you will discover the passion about one of those things. And if you do this long enough and you're still only interested in it and haven't yet found your passion, maybe become interested in something else. And we, as the elders, have to open these kinds of doors for our children and just, create these joint moments where an interest may spark. Maybe it's going to a museum, maybe it's going to a water park, maybe it is going on a trip together, and instead of flying, going on a road trip together. But simple things, cooking together. That's really what I feel is the advice I would give any 18-year-old, including my younger self.
Yeah, that's gosh, I mean, that's brilliant in its simplicity, and I think that resonates with people, right? Is the only real, or I guess the best advice is explore, right? There's a lot, I think, if you could narrow it down to a word, what you just said, explore.
Explore.
And, I found that in order to find out what I like doing and what I'm passionate about, I really had to figure out first what I wasn't passionate about, right? I think that's maybe sort of the inverse way of saying go explore. Try this, don't like this, try this, don't like this, try this, don't like this, and eventually you find one. But that the ease with which you answer that question is elegant, but that's right on the tip of millions of people's minds for how to sort of get through that. So good stuff, really, really good stuff. All right, so you saw the tech boom happening in the U.S.
I did,
and you wanted a piece of that. I'm curious, how did you dove in? How'd that go?
So what happened is, as I said, my business school is actually quite famous, and so one day before I even got my degree, there was a poster on the wall, and in Germany, all we had is SAP. In essence, there was, SAP is one of those technology giants, and Germany is not that great in software engineering. We're really talking about software, data, and these kinds of technologies, not hardware or anything like that. That's where the Germans are good. They know how to engineer hardware things well. But I was interested in software, in particular the internet. It was this internet bubble, this internet hype. So how do I get into the internet industry if all we have in Germany is SAP? And lucky for me, there was a poster in my business school that said, we are 100 people today. We have $10 million in revenue, but with incredible confidence, we will be tens of thousands of people one day, and we will have tens of billions of dollars in revenue. And by the way, we're going to change the world. And if you're interested in going on this journey with us, send us your resume. Back then, I had just updated my resume after my last stint with the Japanese government, so I was ready. I sent it over, and just like you Americans are, it's just fascinating. The next thing I know is my phone rings within a few hours. I had sent it to Vienna, Virginia, the headquarters of this company called MicroStrategy. Within a few hours, my phone rings, and I will never forget. Melissa Corrin is on the phone and says, I saw your resume. Our founders will be in Germany, next week, Monday, and maybe it was a Thursday. Would you like to come up to Cologne, where we're thinking about starting our German office? I said, I'm there. So, I jump into one of those super fast trains in Germany. They paid for everything. And it was just unbelievable to me, because that kind of a culture that just doesn't exist in Germany, at least not at that time. So I met Mike Saylor, who's now famous. I met Sanju Bansal, who's now famous. I met Sid Banerjee, who's now famous. And they interviewed me with these very intellectual questions, and they knew that I was not a technologist. The only technology I'd ever touched was Microsoft Word to write my master thesis, and I got in. So I helped them, build out the German office without even understanding what this technology does. Educated the first set of customers on what this technology does, until one day I just couldn't hide my embarrassment anymore. I called them up and said, can I come over to headquarters to just actually learn what this technology does? And sure enough, this incredible, entrepreneurial spirit that really, to my degree, only exists in the United States. They said, great, come on over. We're expecting you this and that day. And I got stuck. I learned the technology. I forced myself to learn English more than, I was capable of doing at the time. I rose through the ranks. I was maybe employee number 200 or so. We grew the company up to 2,700 people within no time. And then the bubble imploded. We had to restate our earnings, restate our revenue. And I ended up being the person with an Excel spreadsheet with 2,000 names on it of 2,700 people that I had all, I spent nights and weekends with them. I recruited many of them, because I was an old timer at the time. And so I had to run from exit interview to let go of my old colleagues and friends that I went to war with. Ended up being one of the 700. As a German, my mom is very German. I am very stubborn. And so there were 6 of us that said, either we will die professionally with this company, or we will have some influence on rescuing the company. And sure enough, a few years later, as we scrambled and tried to retain the existing customer base, re-motivate the existing employee base, regain, the stock market's trust, because we were a publicly traded company, always at the risk of being delisted. One day, we sat around that same conference room and we realized we were the sixth most profitable publicly traded company in the United States, and we did it. That experience cost me so much hair, as you can tell,
Yeah.
and so many nerves, but that's how I stumbled into technology.
Yeah, that's amazing. Look, I know how the hair thing goes. Trust me, I'm right there with you. I'm curious. So laying off 2,700 employees, obviously, that's not an easy thing to do. I'm curious, what was that like, and what did you learn from that, and what is there anything that you learned through that you were able to take with you, to make you a better executive?
Right. So it was 2,000 out of 2,700. I didn't do all the exit interviews. We divided and conquered, a terrible term. But we literally ran through headquarters as fast as we could, and did exit interviews as fast as we could. So first lesson is, once you realize that something has to be done, you just have to rip the Band-Aid. You can't drag it out. And so we did it in 2 waves. But at the same time, that you may also not have a job very soon. That's number one. Just be very realistic about this. The company might die. And number 3, you have to recognize that all of those people, to some degree, all of those team members, to some degree, have put blood, sweat, and tears into this company. So you have to, as much as you can, show empathy and try to help them, guide them, finding good jobs after MicroStrategy. And so, to the best degree that I could, I did that. But those are the 3 lessons. There's one person I already know, and I'm not going to say her name, but she will never speak with me again. But the others have, turned from colleagues to friends to people that we can call each other. We call each other the MicroStrategy Mafia. We can call each other up through this bonding experience, not just the positive bonding experience, but also the extremely brutal bonding experience, as long as you can do it, well. And I cannot claim that I did it well, but at least, it creates some kind of shared experience that is like a near-death experience that you share, that can create a bond that you can then, not use, but I think it naturally led to this ability for any one of us to call each other up and say, I need help. And it can be me, it can be them, it can be, among them. And we will always help each other.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And yeah, I think I call it trauma bonding. That obviously losing your job, especially if you really care about it and have dedicated it a lot, is certainly traumatic. But I think that, look, the fact that you're friends with most of these people afterward, I think you said you weren't sure if you did it well. To me, I think that's sort of direct evidence that you did it well. In fact, I don't know how you could do it better if you could still remain friends with those people. But it's also just generally, I think sage wisdom that a lot of people could take.
And it's the right thing to do. You have to do. Also, early in my career at MicroStrategy, I learned that when you start pretending to know something, or you start pretending to, be able to do something, you'll very quickly knot yourself up into these inconsistencies, and you won't be able to, unravel yourself anymore. And so I try as much as I can to just be true to myself. I know I'm not a genius. I know what I know. There's many things I don't know. I know there's some things I do really well, and I know there's many things that I do horribly. You may not notice, but I have, I spilled something on my shirt, so I'm far from perfect, and I know that. I just try the best I can.
Yeah, that authenticity and humility, I find, is desperately lacking in so many, institutions, frankly, right? Like not just businesses, but government, you name it. And I think that at least where we are in society today, that there's just this insatiable desire or thirst for authentic, humble, real humans. And just talking to you for a few minutes, it's obvious that you're one of those. And so it doesn't surprise me that you had, whether folks that was reporting to you or folks that you worked for, you still maintain those relationships with. So tell us, how did the East Bank opportunity come up, and sort of walk us through that initial hire when you were given the role that you were given there?
Yeah. Well, at the time, I ended up living in Manhattan. I had missed the birth of Lucas, who's now 20, because I was in the middle of fixing a company, had my priorities extremely wrong. And so I decided that I would take a sabbatical if I were ever lucky enough to have a second child, and really be there prior to the birth and after the birth to make sure everything is okay. And I'm one of those people. I'm obsessive. Once I get into something, I obsess over it. So the only solution for me was to just hand in my BlackBerry. It was the BlackBerry era still. Hand in my BlackBerry and said, I'll be back, but give me 6 months to really just be there for the family, because I didn't do it the last time around. And so Sienna was born in New York. Everything was great. We had bought a very beautiful brownstone in Brooklyn, lived a very nice life. And so at one point, I had Lucas, who was 2 or 3 at the time, at the back seat on my bike as we're going to a public swimming pool. And my phone rings. And it's the 2 co-founders of East Bank Tech, Anthony Lanier and Slava Arsenyev. They called me and said, well, we heard of you from the 2 founders of MicroStrategy, Mike Saylor and Sanju Bansal, who are here in Washington, D.C., that you're a fixer-upper and that you have too much time on your hand. And so we have a tiny tech company that is just one of the many businesses that they owned, and we don't quite know what to do with it. Would you mind coming to DC for a week and just take a look around, interview the customers, talk with the CEO, meet the team members, and tell us what you think? And so I did that. And, I gave them my list of things that I liked. Classic red flags, yellow flags, green flags. Green flags were the engineers. I had never met. At MicroStrategy, we were, as you could tell by the hiring poster, changing the world. We were extremely arrogant. We were convinced we were God's gift to this earth. And we realized we weren't. But here was a set of engineers, maybe 15 or 20 of them, that were truly brilliant. And they were just farmed out in some kind of staffing capacity, which I thought was just such a wasted opportunity. One of the recommendations I made is that you need someone that, as you can see, rolls up their sleeves, bangs on the table and says, I need something to happen. I'm going to make it happen. Good luck. And the customers, by the way, said, well, they're not perfect. They may not shave one day. They may have wild hair. They may appear in shorts in a professional environment, but they have no delivery issues. And I thought that is just an amazing marketing statement, to work on technology and have no delivery issues, where you always have delivery issues. I saw on your website, you're a technology company and you've experienced what it means to deploy an application, and there's a bug here and there's a bug there, and timelines slip here and there. And it was just not true for these 15 engineers. And so good luck. I went back to New York City. The next day, my phone rings and they said, well, we thought about it. Would you want to run this company as the CEO? And had made so much money at MicroStrategy, and there's just no way they could afford me. I tried to explain it to them, but once you ever meet Anthony Lanier, you know that the one word that does not exist in his vocabulary is no. Yeah. And so 3 months later, I ended up being the CEO, took a huge pay cut, but I was in love with the company, and we started just, building organically what I feel is one of the best AI companies that, at least in the Mid-Atlantic. Let's just try to be humble about this. But I realized that you really need to focus on the very cutting edge of technology and be true to that statement that you don't have delivery issues in the unknown world of the cutting edge technology, not your standard commodity type of technology. And so we were early adopters of mobile when, the iPhone came out, or other such devices. We were early adopters of AWS when AWS came out, which means we had 7-year head start to Microsoft when they started thinking about a cloud, which ended up getting me on the customer advisory board for Microsoft as they were thinking about their cloud. And over time, that meant we didn't have to be some lowly staffing company anymore. People realized that if they needed innovation, real innovation, reliable innovation, they had to call us. And I never had a sales team in the company. Literally, customers call us through word of mouth as they get to hear about us from other customers. And now we've grown the company beautifully. We have 3 offices, hundreds of team members at this point. We've expanded into Europe, and literally everyone who's used the internet has used software that we developed and doesn't know we exist. And I like that.
Yeah, that is truly unbelievable. So for the audience, maybe the more non-tech oriented audience, rewind us back or take us back to 2007. What was the product or service that Eastbank was providing that it didn't have any delivery issues on? Like, what was the core of the business back then?
So back then, you had to deal with, maybe it's best explained through a customer story.
Yeah,
so at one point, I got a call from one of the top technology providers in the world. I can't name them, but it'll be in the list. It could be a Microsoft, it could be an IBM, it could be a Deloitte, it could be a Booz Allen, it could be a McKinsey. So one of those called me and said, we just talked to the CTO of one of your customers, and we wanted to give them $1 million in what was called a service-oriented architecture. It's a broken down system that is not one monolithic piece of software. It is many different pieces of software that can exchange data much more fluidly than was possible before. And the CTO said, well, we already have 15 of these web services in production. It was a government agency. And I got this call and they said, this is unbelievable. We don't even yet have commercial customers that are using this technology. And here the CTO said they already have 15 in production and production is where innovation happens. Everything else is just research. It has to go in front of real users. And so when we asked, how did you do it? They said, well, just call this guy Wolf in Georgetown. It's his team that did that. And so I got this call and, they couldn't believe that we did that, that we essentially pulled the rug out from under their feet and had already, created what was a string of innovation awards for that particular customer. And so that was the first of many, many, at the edge back in 2007.
Yeah. So is it fair to say that you guys provided the engineering, the brain power, the consulting? Consulting is not the right word. The engineering and the brain power to sort of re-architecture.
Perfect. That's the key term. You just used the key term. In everything, just like building buildings, as you know, without an architect, you'll have a very inflexible building. You will not be able to extend it out. The foundation is not strong enough to hold yet another floor,
right?
And on and on. The same is true in technology, in software. And so, yes, of course, you try to take software off the shelf from one of those providers. You don't want to custom build everything. There's pieces in a building, as it is in technology, that you want to get from somebody else. But certain pieces you have to architect correctly for you to custom build so that you have a unique house that fits your purposes. And that's what we did.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I suspect that's valuable down the road too, because if it's built in a way where sort of more of a Swiss Army knife approach instead of if you take this one part out, the whole system doesn't work. That you could previously unforeseen needs or reasons, you could maybe pull one part out and then implement it in a use case that wasn't anticipated previously. So that's really interesting. And so at that time, early 2000s or mid to late 2000, what do you call those? The aughts, right?
Oh, gosh. You're asking a foreigner.
I know, right? But like give us some reference. I mean, is that still a employed strategy?
Yes.
Today? Okay.
Yes, and so it is to this very day. Of course, it has advanced. So back then we called it a service-oriented architecture, which is the first iteration of this. Now we broke it into what's called microservices. So think of something that does one thing and one thing only. And if it goes down for whatever reason, the entire system will not break. But maybe a button is not working right now, but everything else still works. And it's one of the reasons why you probably have a hard time remembering the last time, let's say, Google was down. When could you not do a Google search? And the reason is this type of an architecture, a microservices architecture, put into very extendable other pieces of software and orchestrated by yet another piece of software, so that if, say, one of the clouds is down, all you do automatically is swoop into another cloud. So we can literally guarantee you almost that we will be able to create something for you called architecture, and this kind of a microservices architecture that will allow you to never be down, even if one of the clouds is down. And so, yes, it has evolved dramatically. And, we got asked by, there's a foundation, this is open source technology, so it's not owned by one of the big providers. We were asked by the foundation to be the local hosts for this, set of technologies. Now there's many, many more innovations like this, but that was the evolution of that particular piece of technology.
Right. That was probably a more artful way to ask that question. Would have been, has it evolved sort of into like a totally different approach, or is it sort of generally recognizable as sort of that still that yes. same kernel? And it sounds like that it has, that approach has withstood the test of time, and that all this, maybe look a little bit different. It's still the benefit and the purpose of doing that still exists. And so, I imagine somebody in the audience is a small business owner. They've got, every business leverages and or relies on, some software suite or combination thereof. What's the level at which this becomes a critical, strategic plan that needs to be executed? Do you guys work with, or do firms like you guys work with, probably not mom and pops, but smaller businesses, or are we talking about just publicly traded, can't go down, or else
No. Once you start only working with the big companies, you lose your ability to be agile and nimble. And so by design, I don't know if this is the accurate number, but by design, we also work with the tiniest of all possible companies called startups, where somebody may just have a PowerPoint and an idea, and we need to find a way to continue to keep that nimbleness that is required for a company like that, so that we continue to bring this nimbleness and agility up to the big companies, while at the same time, on day one, making these kinds of tiny companies understand what it means to be enterprise class, meaning never to go down, being extendable, not always having to, throw software away after yet another month or 2 or 3 or years, but build software to last, so that you can always build on it, like in a good building, like that building behind me. This, right. Pre-Civil War, and it withstood the test of time. It was the first custom house of the United States, and is now a software factory.
Yeah,
that's what good software does.
Well, look, I mean, and you probably didn't know this when we got started, but the my company, for example, we perform between 11 and 15,000 property surveys across the country every month. And so it's, we're a software company, or we're a technology company first. Our work product is property surveys, but we have a proprietary system that is really a backbone that allows us to do that, because it organizes the processes and sort of ushers each one through the different stages or right. phases. then gosh, we spend a lot of time thinking about, all right, what about redundancy and backup? But it hits home exactly what you're saying, that we happen to be a land surveying business, but there's a distribution company in Roanoke, Virginia, that is just as reliant on their either semi-custom or off the shelf but tweaked software platform.
Yes.
It seems to me that as long as technology is around, or as long as businesses are around, that the need for what you guys, the issues you guys solve, or that you help to solve, maybe too absolute, right? I mean, the issue that you guys assist with will be with us forever.
And you, Brandon, sit on this gold mine of today. So you what I always try to tell to any business, doesn't matter big or small, medium size, technology or other industries, as long as you gather data and you control your own data, you sit on the next wave of technology that we call AI, and I'm happy to explain it. But you sit on the food of these AI engines. So you have the ability to actually turn into an AI company, with a term I don't like, but you can turn into an AI company because you have the food for that engine that will determine, decades of evolution in technology. And don't take my word for it, but Oxford University, it's one of my favorite websites, is a website called Our World in Data, probably .org or something like this. It's a data website, and website doesn't do it justice. And the professor there, Max Rosner, as everyone started talking about AI, he wrote just a fantastic blog post where he said, everyone needs to understand what we're facing now in tech. He's not a hyper. Put some grain of salt on my words. Maybe I am a hyper. Maybe, as the chairman of the company, I do have to defend why we exist. But if somebody like Max Rosner says that we are sitting on the third transformational event in human history, not 5, not 10, 3, and that one is AI. And so as everyone is starting to talk about AI, and he wanted to remind everyone that everyone has to start understanding what this thing can do, and there's no magic. It gets its food with data that you own. It processes it with mathematics. That is one of the laws of nature. The language of the universe is mathematics. There's no magic to its math, and incredible computer power. And those three elements are what creates an AI. And so what I would recommend every business is try to get your own data in whatever form possible, and you will be part of this next wave that will last for a very long time. And you will have a survival mechanism against others that might want to enter your space because you own the data. There's no way for them to enter your space.
Yeah. Well, I mean, gosh, I could talk with you for 2 hours on this, because I've got a million questions
about it.
I have too. And look, we've had my chief technology officer and I. We've had several discussions about. I mean, look, we're fortunate. We're a business that's been around for a long time. We've got close to 1 million property surveys. In fact, we now have over 1 million property surveys. We have the data from these property surveys. The question that I know that we have, that I'm certain other businesses have, is the acknowledgement of, look, we have the data. We don't know if it's in the right format, but it's formatable.
Doesn't matter.
We have the data. We have it saved. It's sort of matching the. We'll use your analogy, right? So, like, we know we've got the food, but do you find sort of a data aggregator partner, or do you where do you find the hungry AI in order to match the right food with the right system that's looking for that particular type of food? And maybe the answer isn't there yet, but I'm curious.
No. I literally just opposite of me is also a chair, and in that chair sat a homeowners association. A big one. And and they said, well, we know everything about the buildings that we manage. We know the name of the building manager. We know the tenants. We know the payments that they make, and on it goes.
Last time they changed the HVAC filters and everything. Yes.
Everything. And it doesn't matter what format you own the data. It doesn't matter in what format you own it. And then there's no use in recreating something that somebody else has already created. OpenAI, Google, you name it, Microsoft. Those are just some models. And and then all you really need to do sounds super simple, but you need to combine what is already out there on the market with compute power, get into one of those clouds and combine that with your data in the right architecture. That's where most of them fall flat. And that's where I can come in, selfishly. But with the right architecture, you will be the owner of an AI that happens to be a homeowners association. And you will be, and I can't believe the number of land surveys you do, but that's great information to explore with an AI. And what does an AI do? All AIs predict. That it's all about predictions. They predict the future.
Right.
And maybe it's 3 minutes from now, maybe it's half an hour from now, maybe it's a year from now, but that's what they do. There's no magic. They do predictions. So they do get it wrong every now and then. We call them hallucinations. But in the end, if you want to be able to predict the future of your business, those are the 3 elements you need to find a way to put together in a good architecture. And suddenly you have AI.
Yeah. No, I love that. So once we conclude this, we can continue the discussion. I would love to engage you to have a discussion about whether you guys have the availability to pursue something. But just to take it one step further, and I'm similar to you in terms of once I get turned on to something, I obsess about it until it's either 100 miles an hour or 0. And at 100, I'm often looking for some breaks. But I've thought for years about the data, particularly as it relates to the housing market and predicting, and whether it's Home Depot sends, I think 500,000 targeted email marketing, 500,000 emails that are part of their email marketing strategy. And of course, look, I mean, they don't want to send an email, and I'm certainly not preaching to the choir, but the way I think about it, they don't want to send an email about roofing products to somebody that rents, for example, right? Like that, they want that somebody that has copper gutters. They want to, if there's a sale on copper gutters, that they'd like to send the email to the people that are the buying decision makers on that. From something as simple as that to you've got these massive home services businesses that want to know before they get there, what the quote's going to be for the sodding the front yard. I mean,
Right.
just the access to the data. If you think about it, compared to just 10 years ago, how we used to do business, right? Where people drive to a house and look around and take measurements and say the fence is going to cost, whatever, $5,000. But, that data is sitting on somebody's server somewhere, whether it be the person that built the property. Anyway, it's just, it's been fun to think about the power that the data or what the data could do. I think for people like us, and I suppose that's where you come in, there's just a disconnect between, all right, there's the data, can see how it can be useful, but how does this really work? Who's going to do it? Where's this magic AI that is going to come fly in and make it happen?
Right.
Could you speak any more to that? I mean, you explained it well, but for the non-tech folks who are intimidated or confused or just throw their hands up in the air, yes, AI, it's going to be this huge thing, but how?
Yeah. So maybe a good example is so maybe first, I am German. Germans are famously boring, and Germans wanted to call this in the beginning. They wanted to call it predictions based on complex data processing. And then for some reason, the American marketing genius took over and said, no, that's way too self-explanatory. I know, I just get the 3 elements: predictions based on data processing. Let's call it artificial intelligence. but it's not. It's just, predictions. It predicts something about the future. So one example is City of Houston. We predict a system that we build runs 400 predictions 400 million predictions every single day. It's based on Microsoft's cloud services, but it's built in a way that it can also be in other clouds. And it takes the data in from, say, a bus, a light rail, a water taxi, if they have them, and just watches where they are. And based on circumstances, let's say, there's a hurricane hitting Houston, you can see the system be disturbed and you can predict how the system will come back together again. All these hundreds and hundreds of moving assets, buses and so on, how they get disturbed and how they get off schedule and how they slowly start getting back on schedule, if ever. And you want to just be able to predict that so you can prepare yourself as an agency. So that's what AI does. It predicts the state of a system like that 3 minutes from now, 6 minutes from now, 9 minutes from now, 30 minutes from now, so that you as a rider can adjust yourself and say, okay, I'll stay in the Starbucks 5 more minutes because my bus is not arriving yet. Or you say, well, it looks like there is no bus arriving. Let me jump into my car if I have one, or take a different bus. And so that's really what AI does. It predicts something, and only you know what would be a minimal viable prediction that is worth something to you, Brandon, in your business. And to every reader, or every listener, there is something in their business, if they could just be able to predict it for a certain period of time with some probability. It'll never be 100% because, predictions are hard, especially if they involve the future. The famous Niels Bohr quote.
Yeah.
And so, but what is it worth it to you to know that with 85% likelihood, X will happen in a certain period of time? And only you as the owner of your business, or the CEO of your business, or the chief marketing officer of your business, or the land surveyor in your business will be able to say that minimal viable prediction is worth X amount of dollars to me, or X amount of time to me. And those are really the only two variables that define an ROI. And so the extreme example is, we're not a government contractor. We work with commercial companies to the largest degree. But the most extreme example I found is a process that took one of the government agencies 18 months to complete. Not because they're slow, not because they don't have, the manpower, but it is just the nature of this process. It takes 18 months to complete. It's almost like the famous example of starting to paint the Golden Gate Bridge. And once you're done at the end, you start yet again, right. 18 months. And so adding generative AI to a process like that resulted in this 18-month process to be completed in 1 week. 18 months to 1 week. And so once you identify that equivalent of that process in your company, doesn't matter if you're tiny or large, but wherever this kind of power could be applied and save you this much time and therefore gazillion dollars, that's where you should think about adding AI. And AI is not the hammer that you want to use on every nail and every screw. It's not a magic thing that suddenly solves everything. But in some cases, it can have these kinds of results.
Yeah. That is...
I'm sorry, I get passionate and carried away about these things.
Well, no apologies necessary. I just ate up every word. But so I think, rightly or wrongly, at least in the U.S., AI, from a sort of a generic understanding, is really closely linked to these LLMs, right? ChatGPT and Grok and these others. And I think that that there's a little bit of a disconnect between, wait a minute, I go to ChatGPT and ask some very complicated question, and I get an answer, right? So how is that necessarily predicting, but I'll let you answer. My assumption is it is predicting what it thinks the answer is based on what it's learned previously. But is it essentially the same?
That's it.
Logic?
There's zero intelligence in ChatGPT from my arrogant perspective. It just predicts based on. So I would have to go a bit too technical, talk about vector databases and retrieval augmented generation architectures. I'm going to forget about this. But based on its understanding of how you put the words in your question together, it tries to predict the very first word that will be the perfect word with 95% likelihood to answer your question. And based on picking that word within the context of your question, and it doesn't understand your question. It is not in context. It has no clue what your question actually means, the meaning of it. But it predicts the first word to your answer, and based on incredible volumes of data that you have too in your business, it predicts the next word that will be able to answer your question. And it does it repeatedly over and over again, and it has no clue what it just answered to you. It doesn't understand its own answer to your question that it didn't understand. It's all just statistics predicting the next most likely word. That's it.
Wow. Yeah, so it makes like a extreme sort of analogy or examples of, so if one of us was on another planet listening to people talk that we couldn't understand their language, but we digested enough information and watched them for long enough, and we would ultimately be able to predict that when this being says, whatever, that I expect that other one's going to answer, with this tone or this noise. That's essentially what you're saying. That's what ChatGPT is they've just observed so much of our conversation and so much of our discussion and so much of our writing that mathematically they can, without understanding it, say, look, I think that the arrangement of words to that question that was just answered is this.
Yes, that's right. And how babies learn language. Learning that, looking at me, the right word to address me is daddy, without understanding what it means. What does daddy actually means? And the right word to, address the mom is mommy, without understanding what the difference is between mommy and daddy, except for an image. My face is different than my wife's. And that's how, that's the level that ChatGPT is on right now. And we have progressed so much that we actually now, after say 7 years or 8 years, we have an understanding of, the meaning of our own language. Until then, we just mimic, what we see.
Right. Yeah. So that it's sort of so maybe an example is as an adult, if you want to go learn a foreign language, it's the initial stage of, it sounds funny rolling off your tongue, but you just like this is the word for dog, and then you just sort of repeat it. But at some point, once you learn it well enough, you're able to think in that language and potentially dream in that language. So in terms of the singularity, right, artificial general intelligence that they, is bandied about in the news, is that equatable to the contextual understanding of what's happening?
So I'm definitely not a Kurzweil. I'm just such a practical guy. I don't want to speculate about, but so far, none of the AIs has any type of awareness, self-awareness, and it has no real creativity. It just tries to predict something. And I think we do need self-awareness, creativity, and some other factors before we can even dream about, or maybe worry about having something like that to become, an artificial general intelligence. So far, they're all just point AIs, I would call them. So I was interviewed by Chinese TV at the time when Google's DeepMind beat the reigning Go grandmaster in South Korea 8 years ago. And the question was, is this now becoming aware? No, 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 it's not becoming aware. Is this dangerous? No, 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 it's not dangerous. These are all just mathematics in play on top of data. This thing still doesn't enjoy the game of Go. It just knows how to win. That's it. And then confronted with a chessboard, even though chess is supposedly an easier game, and it'll just blink at you, with blank eyes. What is that? It can't even transform from one context to the other. It just knows how to win the game of Go.
Wow. Well, but that's interesting, because that suggests that it's not just a question of when, but it sounds like it isn't necessarily a foregone conclusion that that's really even possible.
In my opinion, you're absolutely right. That's exactly the right statement. There's others that say it is a foregone conclusion, but famously, what is this thing called? ESP. I remember I read somewhere. I think it's famous. It's fantastic as an analogy. A researcher once told the ESP community, if you believe in ESP, lift my right arm. You sit in front of an audience, you say, who of you has experienced XYZ? Raise your right arm. And so to turn it around, I will believe it when I see it. Until then, I'll be always skeptical that something different has to happen than just mathematics being able to predict something.
Well, that's insightful. I don't know that that's really well known. I think, at least before this conversation, my understanding was that's sort of that is the future, that it will happen, like that we have sort of set in motion the chain of events that will lead to artificial general intelligence. The question is, what are we going to do, if anything, to stop it, halt it, contain it, et cetera?
Yeah.
And I'll have to think about this a little bit differently now, because what I hear you saying is, very humbly, that we shouldn't just assume that it's a foregone conclusion. There may be some more analysis or some more understanding that needs to happen of whether or not it's even possible to get there at all.
Think of the three elements of AI. So let's just assume if we can strengthen the three elements of AI infinitely, will that then lead to AGI? Maybe, I don't know. And I don't, like I said, I don't want to even say that. But okay, so what are the three elements of AGI? Data. We have now run out of data officially. The entire internet has been ingested by these Gen AI LLMs. The entire internet, we've run out of data. Okay, so we just need to create more data. There is still more data, but it's hidden inside of your company, inside, on a server somewhere. So yes, there's endless streams of data still available. But even then, on the data side, you and I have now generated more data than an AI can ever possibly be able to, absorb. So, for instance, maybe I'm nervous and I'm starting to sweat. And AI has no clue what that even feels like and means like. And you're maybe now getting a little hungry and you have this desire to bite into a hamburger or eat some salad. And then AI doesn't even know what that data means that you're feeling right now, and what that data that, and that's just one level of data. You and I have become, situationally aware of our surroundings. As I was talking, seems like the AC has stopped working here, or maybe it's, at the right level now. And so it's getting a bit warmer here. Maybe it's the sun shining. I smell the tea that I'm drinking. All of this is data. It's all data. And this is what we have fed an AI so far. Is just a sliver of what you and I have experienced ourselves in this, 1 hour, 30 minutes, or however long we have talked. Also, the experience of having spent 30 minutes and 60 minutes will be unreachable for an AI to even process for a number of. So now we've covered, at least to some degree, the one element, AI. Let's pick compute power, all these clouds. I have a nice tidbit from one of the hyperscalers. The hyperscalers are Google, Amazon, and Microsoft. And one of them told me recently that if we just AIify 5% of all the processing that is happening in this one cloud, we will have to double the number of our data centers. Only 5%. Do you think that's possible? I don't know. Like, we would have to essentially cover the entire planet.
Yeah.
If I want to be dramatic about this, we would have to cover the entire planet with computers, with data centers, in order to be able to just process all of this. And we're still talking just about a sliver of data. So will it be possible? I don't know. Will we have to attach a nuclear power plant to every single one of those data centers? Will we have to stack them up somewhere?
Yeah.
The problems and this is just the AI that we have today. 5% will mean doubling the number of data centers. We're far from being able to cover 100% of all the workloads in all the data centers with predictive technologies at this point. And then the last one is mathematics. We have now the mathematics that will allow us to take the entire internet and have it be processed by a fraction of the compute power that this world will ever be able to build, I think. So there's so much more mathematics we need to build, and it may be even a miss. So I wouldn't worry too much about it yet.
No, that is so unbelievably interesting to me, because to me, these are the things that, we live in a soundbite world where you get to see, either hear a little bit, one little soundbite, or read a little snippet, right. And we tend to sort of draw conclusions from there. These aren't things that anyone ever tells anybody about with regard to AI. It's, oh, guess what? It's coming. It started. We're going to have, we better stop it, or it's going to take over the world. It's going to take everybody's jobs.
Yeah.
And stopping and thinking about it and understanding some of these things. I'm curious, well, with regard to the compute requirements, so did I hear you correctly? I mean, so in order to, quote unquote, AIify all of, that particular data centers data, they'd have to double 20 times, right?
Yes.
Okay. Like to go from 5%, and then assuming it's 100%, they'd have to double and then continue to double 20 times. Then they could be AIified, right?
Exactly. Only the existing workloads.
Right.
There will be more.
Yeah. So, I have heard a little bit about the power requirements concern with regard to the amount of energy that's required, not power, the amount of energy that's required to process or to power these processors. Is that sort of a red herring, or is that also a big issue that we're going to be confronted with?
I think it's one of the innovations that we need to come up somehow, that this is not going to be a showstopper for this if we believe that AI is something we should pursue. The kind of AI that I just described, that I personally am not afraid of at all.
Yeah.
If we want to pursue it to a degree that we AIify as many of those workloads and processes that would be useful to attach an AI system to, we'll have to find a breakthrough to be able to even find the energy for that.
I guess on both ends, right? So like that, we have to innovate in ways that makes it be able to do that, consuming less energy, and then some type of innovation on the energy side to basically create more energy to expend. Gosh, that's
and there's plenty of people that disagree with me on this, but I just happen to, like I told you in the beginning, I happen to be an explorer, and I'm not afraid of saying what I think, and I try to base it on what I know. I'm very aware that there's many things I don't know, but this is what I see today. And
so, when you argue, like, I mean, if someone were to disagree with you, or if you've had those disagreements in terms of, whether this is something we should be afraid of or not afraid of, what points do they make that, or where do they consider you to be incorrect?
I don't know, but I do get plenty of disagreements. So, for instance, at one of the first AI meetup, we call it a meetup here in Metro DC, I was invited as a keynote speaker. And one of the questions that everyone gets who talks about AI is, will this ever kill us? Will AI ever kill us? And so a very simple answer to this is, these AIs don't wake up understanding something. So the Brandon AI for your company will not suddenly understand your company. You have to train it. You have to train it with the data you have, which is why I said, within your industry, you might be one of those that cuts through your industry using these kinds of technologies and can be a leader in your industry as an AI because you have the data to train it. So an AI has to be trained. And the last time I checked, we have no training data on how to kill humanity and destroy planet Earth because we're still here. We haven't done that often enough yet to even train an AI to understand how to kill us all and destroy planet Earth. We need to get that training data. If that is our purpose, we've got to find a way to destroy the Earth a few times before we can train an AI to understand how to do it on our behalf. We haven't done it yet.
Yeah, that's
we don't have the data.
So it's not AI is not in its current iteration isn't intelligent enough, I guess is the only way to say it at the moment, to be able to sort of make assumptions or in other words, it would have to be trained. We would have to train this is how you would have to this is how you'd have to kill us. Here are the 6 million potential ways that you'd have to train us. Now you know how to train us because you can predict which one is the best. Correct. Or whatever. It couldn't extrapolate from like, look, we like to control and or sort of exterminate, if you will, fire ants, right? And the way that we do that is excellent. So it can't take that and sort of extrapolate. Well, the ant is just a species. People are just a species. We'll just use these requirements for that.
It has no imagination. It has no ideas. You have ideas and you have imagination. These things are just data, math, and compute power.
I like that's so fascinating. All right, final question, that we can move off the AI stuff. And I know I've taken so much of your time, but
no.
When you were mentioning all the data that you and I have generated just on this discussion in terms of like facial expressions and how it feels, and if I'm hungry or if I smell, is it fair to sort of equate the current status of AI as only sort of operating with one sense, if you will? Like yes. we have 5 senses and AI has one sense, and that even that particular sense is sort of limited based on the mathematical factors we've talked about. Correct. The amount that it can learn, et cetera.
Correct. And so, I did write a book about AI when I got these questions so often. And the analogy that I found is Plato's cave. So Plato's cave are prisoners that are bound to the wall and have to interpret the wall outside of the cave from the shadows that they see on the cave wall. That is the state of AI right now. It sees, only shadows. So think of it like it's looking at the world, at a sliver of the data of the world through a keyhole, squinting its eye, and that's the extent of its understanding, if you want to even call it understanding.
Right. No, that's interesting. So for non-technical folks that are maybe become more fascinated about AI because of this discussion, where would you direct them? You mentioned our world in data as a platform that you find interesting. Tell us about your book, and then tell us, if somebody wanted to go get more information about this. That's such a broad, maybe impossible question after I hear it come out of my mouth. But first of all, tell us about your book and how we can get your book.
So it's called AI Driven. It's very simple. You just find me on any book delivery service, Amazon, Barnes and Noble. Just put in my name and it'll come up. I'm first-time author, so it's very nerve-wracking. But it hit number 2 on AI in the AI category on Amazon when it came out, and the number 1 in cloud compute. So I'm pretty happy with it.
That's incredible. Incredible.
Well, thank you. And so we tried, based on this experience here, the first AI that my company built is a quarter of a century ago. a quarter of a century ago, we built our first AI. This thing is not, it didn't just suddenly appear out of thin air a year ago when ChatGPT decided to put a chat window on top of an AI. It made it approachable for people. That's just one way of interacting with an AI. And now we all think this is an intelligent chatbot. It's much, much more than that, but it's also much, much simpler than that. And so, it's called AI driven. The goal of it was to tell people that have no technical background without too much fluff in the shortest possible way to understand what this is all about. How do you get ready for it? How do you use the simplest version of it? How do you use the more advanced version of it? What are some best practices to just adopt, even if you don't want to work with me? And how do you have to think about this Gen AI thing that everyone seems to be talking about right now? My World in Good Day, the World in Good Day, Our World in Data is a great website, especially the blogs that Max Rosner puts out. And then I do believe that the hyperscalers themselves, they actually do a good service in educating us. So there's plenty of things that Microsoft publishes or Google publishes or AWS publishes that is addressing or trying to address the non-technical folks themselves. And then nothing is better than actually experiencing it yourself. So there's so many AIs now. There's so many LLMs. There's so many chat interfaces now. I'm looking at my favorites bar. So let's say Mistral AI yesterday came out with the latest model. Go to Mistral AI, ask it simple questions, and understand how it gets so many things so wrong and cannot explain to you why this is right or wrong. There is Perplexity is a fun one that to me has replaced Google search. I use Perplexity instead. Of course, there's OpenAI. The reason why I like Perplexity, I don't get any commissions from Perplexity. Obviously, I cannot be bought. I think the reason why I like it is it proves its answers to you through sources. So then you see what sources you got it from. You can check the source and say, that is a good source. I can, believe it. And on it goes. Nothing beats playing and experiencing AI to actually make up your own mind about this thing. And don't believe any word I just said.
No, for sure. Well, look, you just said something that I think maybe the biggest takeaway from this is that, look, you and your company have been building and executing and implementing AI systems for 25 years. This isn't anything new. It just because there's a chat bot on top of an LLM now, it's not like all of a sudden in 2022 or whatever, I don't even know when ChatGPT-1 was introduced.
November 2022. We played with version 2 in 2018 or 19. That's when nobody yet had any idea this thing is coming, and it was already available to engineers. And so we were dabbling with it, and with all the other ones as well at the time. The stroke of genius was to put a chatbot on top of a chat interface on top of it, and suddenly everyone can relate to it. And I think that's the lesson. Get out of your comfort zone, get a little bit into your uncomfort zone, and play with all of them, and find a way to think through why it works and why it doesn't work, and what it can and what it cannot do.
It's got to be a really interesting place for you guys to be, right?
It is.
You do this for 25 years, and then all of a sudden you walk down the street and people on the street are talking about AI like it just came out.
Right.
And I'm sure that you guys feel the urge to just shout from the rooftops like, people, this has been happening. Yes. This is nothing new. This is nothing new.
Exactly. And that's exactly why, I need to get the word out, because there's so much confusion and so much incorrect information. I have this urge to, just pop that bubble, just like my dad popped my luxury bubble back when I was 13,
I love it.
Same. History has a way of rhyming that is just fantastic. Get me out of my comfort zone, a little bit into my uncomfort zone. Same thing in AI. Pop the bubble, demystify this whole thing. It's my life. My life is always such a string of these types of stories.
That's so cool. Well, so look, that's how I want to sort of draw this to a conclusion or wrap up. Is this urge you feel to sort of correct these misconceptions or get the word out, like you said, like, assume for as long as you'd like, the next hour, the next 25 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 seconds, assume that you have the humanity's microphone and that you have a chance to sort of speak from the rooftop, from the mountaintop to everybody. What is it that you would want to make sure that you corrected?
So every time you hear one of those outrageous statements, always be skeptical and demand outrageous how do you call it? Evidence. Outrageous statement, give me outrageous evidence. Until then, stay skeptical, stay grounded, and try to experience this transformation. It truly is the third transformational event in human history. Experience it yourself by playing with the voice interface of ChatGPT, and urge everyone you can. Even my mom, 88 years old in a senior home in Germany, is now talking about artificial intelligence, in German, künstliche Intelligenz.
Oh, wow.
And, make sure that everyone understands what it is. And if you believe me, then repeat my words. And if not, try to read whatever you can about this. But it is imperative to get on this trend, because it is one of those long waves, just like the agricultural revolution was transformational event number 1, and the industrial revolution was transformational event number 2. The internet was not transformational, and so on. This is the third one. So imagine you're now confused about AI, then you're the equivalent of somebody that is a hunter-gatherer and is confused about this stick with the rock on top and say, this is never going to work. What is this silly thing that you're pounding into the earth right now? Well, the best thing to do to experience it, grab that stick with the rock and hammer it into the ground and put some seedlings in place, and you'll realize you don't have to move from place to place anymore. You can build yourself a house. And the same thing is happening now. And so once you put yourself into that mindset, and I don't mean it in any patronizing way, I mean it as an encouraging way, then you will be very comfortable with this, because you will have grabbed that initial version of an axe or a plow, and you will be part of the journey with me. And then I've accomplished what I wanted to accomplish.
Gosh, that is exciting. It really is exciting. It's rare, I think, to if you're sort of in the forest, right, while one of these events is happening, to sort of have the contextual understanding of like, I'm in it right now, right? I mean, it seems to me like the more common experience is like, gosh, yeah, I lived through that, but I didn't even know that we were going through it. It was just sort of, life, right?
Yes.
And so it's exciting, I think, to be able to take a minute and stop and recognize that in the history of human civilization, there have been 2 transformative events, and that we are witnessing, as we sit here today, the very beginning of the third.
Yes. Yep.
And that's exciting to be a part of. So
I think so too. And there's nothing to be afraid of. Why would I be afraid of going from being a hunter and a gatherer to being a farmer? There's pride in that. Why would I be afraid of ditching a horse and jumping on a car? There is efficiency in that. And we don't know what will happen with this one, but it is that magnitude. And so what a moment to be alive, to be honest. Yeah. And not just me, every one of us, my children, your children, our listeners, you, everyone around us. It's fantastic.
Amen. Amen. What Amen. A blessing. What a blessing, huh?
Yes.
Gosh, well, Wolf, look, I feel guilty for taking this much of your time. Your wisdom and your experience and intelligence is truly fascinating. I also like the way that you have an established humility where at one point you said, if you believe me, then repeat what I said. But I feel like you, instead of just, spouting off conclusions, you simply asked questions. Like I'm not sure if that's the case. And so I don't know how you can't not believe, your thoughts on AI and the lack of a threat that it poses to civilization, just because we don't know. There's just too much that we don't know. So look, I could, if I don't shut myself up, 3 more hours have gone by, and I'm going to be like, wait a minute, I think I understand this. Could you explain this to me again? So
no, and now my problem myself. Once I get started, I cannot stop, because this is just so fun and exciting, and and it is clear that this is an exploratory journey. We don't know what we're going to discover here, but how fun is it to be, a part of an exploratory journey and discover, new animals, new experiences, while
Absolutely.
continuing to be human. Well, I could talk about it for hours and do it for hours.
I love it. Well, thank you. And on behalf of the audience, thank you for sharing a peek into that brain of yours, just a small, quick peek. Would love to have you back on again and have a little bit more structure in terms of some pointed questions about some of this AI stuff and what it may lead to, because I know that for us mere mortals that have a hard time wrapping our minds around it, there's just so much that's like, wait a minute, how did you get there? What? So there's a million questions we could talk through, but in the meantime, please know that we appreciate you, and we will look forward to catching up.
And same. I appreciate you, Brandon, and also allowing me to just speak about it, because I really feel people need to hear, these opinions and form their own opinions by being absolutely skeptical against what I say. I love it.
Yeah.
I welcome it.
Beautiful. All right, Wolf, thank you.
Thank you.
Don't forget, everybody, you can find Boundary Breakers in a lot of places. You can watch our episodes on the Boundary Breakers YouTube channel, or you can listen to each podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or any of the other major podcasting platforms. Thanks for listening.